Welcome to U.S. Rugby Happy Hour Live. Interviews with the biggest names in American rugby.
The New England Free Jacks, Major League Rugby champions. One-on-one to score.
Here are your hosts, Bill Baker and that other guy.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. Good day. Whenever you listen to this, either way, whatever time it is. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Bill Baker, John Fitzpatrick. Fitzy, how's it going?
Good. As the other guy, I'm feeling good, feeling great. It's 14 degrees here in DC. Maybe one of our guests here who's about to come on is used to that, but I'm not. Freezing.
It was -4 when I woke up this morning here in New York, so it might have warmed up to about 7. I'm not sure. But you're not used to it. Are your pipes okay? Have you gone downstairs to make sure you're
I'm a weenie when it comes to the cold, man. I can't handle it.
Oh, it's all good. Listeners, we got a great show lined up for you tonight. This is a topic that Fitz and I have been talking about doing for a long time. We love keeping an eye on the future of the USA Eagles, the men's and women's, tonight's men's programming. So we got two great guests to talk about up-and-coming USA Eagles and the current Eagles as well, who's going to make some big impacts for the team, who we hope will make big impacts for the team. We have Bryan Ray from America's Rugby News, and also a former Eagle and co-host of the Rugby Rundown, Will Hooley, is joining us also at the same time. So we'll have all four of us on screen, a feat we've never done before, I think.
Brady Bunch.
Maybe, yes. Also, Fitzy, happy USA Rugby 50th anniversary.
Oh, that's right. That's correct. Yeah. 2025 marks the 50th anniversary of the founding of the United States Rugby Football Union, founded in Chicago, 1975. Bill, what were you doing in 1975?
I was 5. I'm hoping I was walking by then. We'll just go with that.
I didn't mean to date you like that. I apologize.
It's all right. It's okay. I'm an older guy. It's all right. I'm good with it. It's about not your age, but how you feel. And
That's
so
right.
I really feel like I'm like 70. But speaking of weather, Fitzy, RFC LA is in Fiji to play Fiji Druid this Friday. I really feel like Reese McDonald and the other players joined LA just to make this week and a half trip to Fiji.
Why not?
Why would you want to be in New England training this time of year when you can be tossing around coconuts? I don't know. All right. Listen, we got a lot to talk about. No more banter from us. Let's get into it. For those who are familiar with our show, we've added some really fun a jingle writing department. They are now doing our introductions of our guests, because apparently the feedback from our fans is we're boring with our interaction. So the team has come up with some amazing jingles. Last week's was pretty amazing with Philippa Tituet. Is that close enough? Right?
You were close.
And they're a little bit longer than usual, but I like it. All right. So let's kick it off. Our first guest is here.
America Rugby News, Canadian rugby fan.
Yes.
Tonight we have the info man, the deep source on North American rugby. Canada, America, and maybe some other country. Ryan has forgotten more about rugby than Bill and Fitzy would ever know. Oh, did we mention he once wore gloves as a scrum half? The New England Free Jacks, biggest supporter, somehow puts up with Matt McCarthy. And now here to chat about USA up and coming players. Let's welcome to the show, Bryan Ray.
Yeah, Bryan, there you go. That was all for you, man.
Did Phil Harris write that one?
No. Honestly, most of the
Where
lyrics
did you pull some of those
I got
facts
right
and
next to you.
figures from? Is all of that true? Bill, Ryan, is all that true?
Unreal. Where did you get that stuff?
It's, our jingle department, we don't pay him enough. I mean, clearly, we don't pay him enough. All right, we do have another guest coming up, though, so we should probably get into.
Bill, before we get to our next guest, real quick, Bryan, since we have you here and we mentioned Canada quickly, obviously the news has come out, right? Canada's new men's head coach, Steve Meehan. Would love to get your thoughts as the the unofficial spokesperson for Canadian.
I think everybody in Canada is enthused about a change at that position, and I can't really speak too much about expectations as far as Meehan goes, but he's not the coach who's just departed, so we'll leave it at that. And certainly very much looking forward to a new look Canadian side this year. So quite enthused about that one.
One more on this. You may have seen that Rugby Pass article that came out yesterday, and it basically detailed how thorough it was. I thought that was interesting. It almost they were putting that out because they were questioning if the process was thorough enough.
Let me ask you, did you really think that they vetted 150 coaches in the 2 weeks between they announced Kingsley's departure and Steve Meehan's hiring?
Well, they gave me a call.
As they would.
I thought that was a poor decision. That's what I'll say about that.
Yeah.
All right, Brian. All right, Fitzy. Enough of the Great White North. We're going on to our next guest, and there's really can't say much. This song says it all.
Hey, Bill and Fitzy, let me take it from here.
Good country, baby.
And now we introduce our second guest. To opponents on field, he was a pest. Fly half, full back, whatever was best. Now sports commentary is his trade. The man behind the mic, a young Bill Baker. A fan once said, the Rugby Rundown co-host next to his name. USA Eagle 517, the man on the scene. And now please welcome to the show. We're sure you'll know the man, the myth, well, Hooley.
It's a longer song. It's slower. But Will, you said you like country, so I think the Jingle team ran with it.
I've had introductions, and that is by far the most enthusiastic, well put together introduction, guys. Great to be here with all three of you. It really is a joy to always chat. So, and what a great topic to talk about as well. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And before we jump into it, Will, I want to know if you're okay. I mean, recently you attended a workout with Jocko, the retired Navy SEAL. Are you okay? How was it?
Yeah, I mean, where do we even start with that? What an inspirational, pretty incredible character. And I don't know whether you guys know of Jocko Willink at all. I know he's infamous in many circles, but I'm not saying that everyone has necessarily heard of him. But just the character himself and how he carries himself is inspiring. There's certain things about waking up at 4:34 every morning that I'm not sure I'm going to follow through with. Wow. But the reality of what he says about discipline equals freedom, I think we can all take a little bit about that. But what I also really enjoyed is how much he liked rugby and actually knew about rugby. His wife is English and played rugby back in the day as well. There's a fun fact for you. So he has been to a San Diego Legion game before. And straight away, probably after the interview, I rang the San Diego Legion and be like, give him a free ticket and his family, get him down to the game. So yeah, it was joy, bit of different content and more of that kind of stuff, hopefully dropping this year, but a really inspirational character.
Yeah, and you were joined by a couple of the Legion players. How did they hold up in the workout?
They were former teammates and former friends. They are no longer. The idea sounded great until I said right at the bottom and was like in very small text, oh yeah, you got to be there at 4 a.m. They all did well. It was all like body weight exercises, which I'm not going to lie, as rugby players, you do not do. It's all like power and weights and stuff like that. But you get a rugby player doing as many push-ups as he can or, burpees. You'll see them suffer, and they suffered quite rightly in front of Jocko as well. So, yeah, good fun.
So before we get into the main topic of tonight, Will, just real quick, congrats on the Rugby Rundown. You guys are doing great. Will we see you doing commentary for Major League Rugby this next season?
Unfortunately, for many viewers and listeners, you will. But no, there's some exciting other additions within the ranks of the broadcast team, and certainly I stress to people, and I can stress on here, you know, as much as broadcasting is fantastic, and I really enjoy it. I really want to get my hands and knees dirty with the other side of the camera and the production and broadcast, and there's some really exciting news for Major League Rugby dropping next week with a broadcast provider, and some other couple of additions actually of the female game that I'm looking forward to seeing how they get on. And I've had conversation as well. Again, don't mind saying on here, but after maybe a couple of individuals who might be looking at hanging their boots up at the end of this 2025 season, getting them booth ready and getting them in the commentary box is something which I've massively envisioned. Bill and Fitzy, I've spoken to you about it as well. Like, I would love to see a pathway of these, you know, players going into media and selling the story of a league that they've played in. So exciting times, but unfortunately for some listeners, you're going to have to listen to me again this season.
The dulcet tones. All right, gentlemen, we gathered you here together tonight with us as the Eagles enter a pretty important year. You know, Rugby World Cup qualification stage begins. Both your levels of professionalism are top notch. Bryan, journalist, Will, a former international athlete. Bryan, you may have been an international athlete. I don't know, maybe curling or something like that. I don't know, but it's okay.
Dog sled.
Nice. But I want to start off with just a couple of questions before we get specifics. So I want to just ask you this. Men's Eagles State of the Union. If you had, Bryan, I'll start with you. If you had to state one word to describe the current vibe of the USA Men's Eagles program, what would it be?
Well, I can't steal moonshot now, can I? From this? I don't know. I'm never good at these one-word things. Positive? I don't know.
Okay, no, that's good.
Progress, something like that.
Will?
Oh no! I was hoping,
that's good. It is.
Yeah, I thought Bryan might take a bit longer. Yeah, I guess progress is definitely up there. And I think structure. I think that sounds a boring word, doesn't it? It sort of nullifies progress. But honestly, I think, and without getting too into it yet, I think what Scott has brought, I always knew he would bring is a structure, as a pathway. But it's not just the men's national team. I think it goes a bit deeper than that into sort of the 20s, the collegiate anthem, whatever you want to say. So structure, but that sounds rubbish. But yeah, put that with positivity together.
Nice, Bryan. Let's talk a little bit about the men's Eagles, their current pool. 2024, certainly a very busy year. A number of test matches again, which is fantastic. As you mentioned in the America's Rugby News article that you put out today, starting with the forwards, you mentioned that head coach Scott Lawrence had handed out test caps to 46 different players, which is a big number, which is great. With this year being a Rugby World Cup qualifying year, do you anticipate that number coming down a little bit?
Yeah, I think obviously he'll narrow that pool. I mean, I think if you look at the broader player pool from last year, it was up around 70 players or something to that effect, if you look at all the extended training squad and everything. So, yeah, I mean, when you're coming into, you know, these World Cup qualifiers, he's only got, 2-3 games coming up in July. That's all you've got to put that team together before those qualifiers start. So I would expect he'll probably look around, 36, 38 guys in that squad. And then you're going to be probably around, 30 guys actually playing in those tests. So, yeah, certainly we'll see a shallower pool of players getting capped, I would say, this year.
And guys, let's get into it now. Okay, let's jump into the future, or Back to the Future, which is a copyrighted saying. I can't say that. Our new Eagles, we have some Eagles, obviously, are young, a few caps. We've had 7 caps, 10 caps, obviously not a ton of caps, but obviously in the system now. So we want to talk about those players and also some of the newer players we might see in the next year or so making their way into the program. And MLR definitely has a number of players, including some newer players who have recently became eligible for USA. But with the number of vets aging out, no surprise here, Greg Peterson announced his retirement. Extremely hard to fill those shoes. A big dude like him and experience. Cam Dolan, Joe Taufete, are aging out as well. Who knows? We might see Joe again. Who knows? So the question, generally speaking, for all of us is who's going to fit into those boots. So let's start off with forwards, gentlemen. Bryan, we're going to kick it off with you. Let's look at the front row. Fitzy and I have been looking at players, writing down who's up next. We have the obvious starters, let's say, at loosehead, say Jack Ascaro, Turnbull, that kind of stuff. KP at hooker. David Anu is playing for probably the best club team in the world right now. So let's talk about the front row, Bryan. Give us a couple of examples of players that we should be keeping an eye out for.
Well, I think front row is an interesting one. They're looking in pretty good shape at hooker. There's quite an array of guys, and the two guys who are kind of leading at the moment, Pifoletti and Klein, are both young guys who will be around for a while. So that's really encouraging. Prop, I think, is a really different story, and it's an issue. And I think if you look at the young props around MLR, not a lot of good American props coming up, particularly trying to find ones that can scrum. I think that's a concern. So it's really kind of tough to pick. One guy who stands out, obviously, is Peyton Ilalio at San Diego. He got his debut cap this past year. He won the Schultz Award, which is basically the Heisman of rugby players. So, he was really talked up coming up from St. Mary's into MLR and kind of took an interesting route going to Austin, skipping the draft. But he's obviously very good in the loose. He's strong ball carrier, moves around. And I think the question is, how well is the scrummaging, going to get along? He hasn't quite gotten there yet, but obviously working with Corbicero down in San Diego, that's going to help immensely. He's had one, full year there. So another year with Corbs down there, I think will help him a lot. So he's a guy I would really look at breaking through at loose head. At tight head, I don't know. The cupboard's kind of bare as far as the young guys go. Takaji Young Yen was the guy, we were kind of looking at, but all of a sudden it seems like he's stepping away. Patrick Beattie is a huge guy who's in LA. He's I think he's in the academy, their academy program right now. So, he's one to watch, but I don't know how much he's going to feature in MLR. So I think tight head is actually kind of a concern for me as far as looking to the future. And even right now, we've got Paul Mullen still hanging on there. David Inu, who's really a loose head at Toulouse most of the time. So to me, tight head is a problem.
Will, any input there?
I think Bryan's spot on. He's an absolute expert in these sort of knowledgeable ways of these various players. And I would say it's probably one of the hardest areas for the Eagles to really kick on. And when I say that is I take back to the PNC, and it was a real area of struggle. And it was a lot of facets of the game, which I was really impressed by the Eagles when coming up against Japan or the Pacific Islanders. Got to say, to be fair, the scrum against Tonga in November was a lot better. But it's just like playing at that level, having a solid platform is just essential. And it is worrying when you look at the front row and there's just, like Bryan says, that there's no real standout. Peyton's exciting, and I'm really interested talking about his scrumming ability. Now with John Minetti, I think I've got that right, the new San Diego head coach, he's working those boys tirelessly at the moment. And I'm just interested to see, let's see how his fitness improves and whether that gives him an even bigger and better ball carrying ability, coupled with the fact that Corbs is working on the scrum. So he's definitely one to be excited with. I think Caleb Geiger's such an interesting one because there was so much excitement about this man, especially through his time at New York. Then there was kind of like, are you going to put him at hooker and take the reps and build him next to Dylan Fawcett? And obviously now it's hindsight, but he's now at the Free Jacks. I just don't think that period of trying to put him in hooker was necessarily valuable. I'd love to see him get a really solid season at the Free Jacks in that tight head role. And maybe with reps, I just know how freakishly strong he is, but does that correlate to scrumming? You've got to just have more reps and just stay in the position. So I don't know if that's that helpful, but Peyton and Caleb are definitely ones that I'm looking out for as much as the hookers, as Bryan said. We're probably pretty blessed in that position compared to our props.
Yeah, just sticking with the hookers real quickly, and this is a player everyone's familiar with. He's probably maybe a couple years away, but Seth Smith, right? Youngest player in MLR history to start, maybe score a try, I believe, down there in Houston. His future looks bright, but he's probably, if you get through this year and you qualify for the World Cup, maybe that frees up an opportunity for him to maybe get thrown in a November test. Is it you rush him along, or do you feel like they can wait a little bit longer for a player like Seth?
Yeah, personally, I think with Seth, I think we're probably looking at him after the 27 World Cup. I just think you've got kind of a few more senior guys. Sean McNulty's come through. I think he had his best year of his career probably with Miami last season, and he's not yet 30. So you've got him, you've got Klein, you've got P. Folletti, and then you've got a couple of the veterans. Big Joe's still around. I mean, he's still tremendous when he's in the field. Dylan Fawcett, he's probably got another year kind of in the mix. But I think with Seth, he's 19 years old. Let's just get him reps in MLR right now, and then we'll worry about him, I think, probably around 28. He's going to be around for a while. I like that when he comes in, he doesn't look intimidated. You love to see that in a young athlete. That's a big thing for me, mindset in these young players. So that tells me that he's got a lot of potential. I would be in no particular rush with Seth. He's a player who's going to get there, and it's a position where you do have some depth. So not a big concern for me there.
And what about his what about his Houston teammate Pono Davis? Speaking of the tight head prop, he's I think 27-ish, so not a spring chicken. Certainly, he's got some good experience. I think only 5 caps. Certainly another name who's got a couple of caps over the last year or so. I thought he played particularly well and had some moments. But Bill, probably the biggest name, and I think this is where you were going to jump in, the guy that maybe got away, though isn't quite away yet, hasn't quite been captured by Ireland. I think we all know who I'm talking about.
Hawaiian.
Yes, Salanoa, who he isn't captured yet by Ireland, right? Is there any chance that Scott Lawrence and crew can get that net and bring him back?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Will? I'm interested because obviously you spent a lot of time in the Premiership and overseas. The pressures that are on these players, to kind of make themselves available for the tier 1 sides. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I just was enjoying hearing what you guys were just saying. I think the pressure of contracts over in Europe and not becoming a USA qualified player sounds awful for us talking about USA and the excitement of the future, but it does pay. It does. Honestly, it does quite literally make a difference. And I think there's definitely have been internal conversations. It has to have been within the Irish sort of football union for his position going forward. And I believe, and forgive me if I might be wrong, but the potential of him looking at the Irish sort of second team, or they call it like the development team. I remember they toured South Africa not that long ago and stuff like that. So I can't blame him. I'm sure he's getting a lot more money than he would do in the Major League Rugby. There are those pressures. I think, Scott, I know for a fact we're going to come on to maybe a few names a bit later on. There are conversations that happen across the pond. And I mean that in terms of like those USA qualified talents to try and draw them in. But some do have to think about their careers as a whole, and that's unfortunate. We can't just pay players in Major League Rugby to the extent of what they're getting in Europe. But more importantly, is there's no USA Rugby central contract system that could then also sort of help with bringing those talents over. Yet, I'm not saying in the future. I know that's what Scott ultimately would love to work towards, but you're always going to therefore play a hard line between getting the talent away from a Leinster, a Munster, or anywhere else when they're doing pretty well over there.
And also with the URC Ireland teams, once he's not qualified for Ireland, he's done, or pretty much done. And there goes his contract. And I know at one point he was over in Ireland too, because love of his life is there as well. So, off the field. I thought for some reason he was already off the table for USA because of some kind of commitment, but I guess I was wrong. And honestly, because of that reason, I haven't kept track with him for a bit. I've even forgotten who he's playing for. Is it Munster now? Is it Munster?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's injured. He hasn't been playing a lot recently, and he's kind of struggled with injury, and that's kind of taken him out of the Ireland conversation. And when he kind of got in, he had that chance, and then he kind of drifted out, and that's given an opportunity for some of the younger kids. Tom Clarkson's come up, Tom O'Toole. They're really establishing that Irish tight head spot. So personally, I think if Roman wants to play in a World Cup, it's going to be with the Eagles. So that's the decision that he's going to have to make for himself.
All right, another comment on the front row. We'll move on to the second row. I know Charlotte Klein's seems like I've heard his name for the last 6 years since he's been down in New Zealand. Good to see him with San Diego and getting a couple of caps USA. Caleb Geiger, watching him play in person, he's a big dude, but the problem is, I think you alluded to it earlier, Will, he's just not getting the playing minutes. He's not playing a lot. And for me to not starting on an Major League Rugby side, how is a man supposed to get a lot of minutes with the international side? Again, this is coming from a guy who hasn't played at the national level, but it just seems like he needs to get more minutes. With that said, let's move on. Let's go to second row. Will, I'm going to kick it off with you here. I'm going to throw off a couple names, and actually I'm going to start off with the people we know are starting for USA mostly. Jason Dan can play multiple positions. Mahoney is 27 years old, has 9 caps. If he can stay healthy, you're going to see him all the time in the second row. But losing Greg Peterson, like I mentioned earlier, is a huge loss. So who are we going to fill that gap with?
Well, from internal sources and also Scott Lawrence himself, I'm hearing incredibly good things about Mikey Gandy. And Scott said to me, he said, if you kick a ball any reach from him, bottom, top, left or right, he'll take it. I think he comes from sort of a tight end background. And I hear from the guys as well is he's pretty fierce and hard. And you've got to have that. It's what my good mate Greg Peterson was very good at. He was a hard-edged man. He'd throw his body around and carry hard as well. But coupled with the ability that someone like Gandy could bring at the line out, I have heard excitement around his name. The one which I was really also another name that I was really impressed with last year in a game that I commentated in was William Wagersbach at Nola Gold. I have heard that, no disrespect to him, but we need to harden him up and maybe beef him up, which is a classic case for a young second rower. But he, again, has line-out calling ability, which is not normal across US American talent second rows. It's more of a get you in the second row and push hard. If you again have that other ability to actually line out call, that takes you to another level. I won't go into too much of the detail of that. So yeah, those would be a couple of names. If I'm really looking at guys who I know, Mikey's been capped. I think he's got 1 cap in his name. He went on that November tour. But yeah, Wagersbach as well is someone to keep an eye out. Tall guy who has clearly ability and probably a bit of brain power to him as well in that second row position.
Yeah, Brian?
Yeah, I like both those things. I've seen Grandy play a bit with the Raptors. He's certainly got the physicality. He's a big lump. He's a little bit, on the shorter side for a lock, or about average, I guess you would say, for an American. About 6'5", 6'4.5", 6'5". Wagsback 6'6", a legit 6'6". I think the interesting thing with him is he played in the backs when he was younger in high school, so that's probably where he got kind of he's got a nice pair of hands on him. Yeah, he must have looked Thibaut Flamand, the second coming. I really wanted to see him get a cap last year, to be honest. I'm not sure why he didn't, not sure if there was an injury or something. I was really impressed with, we talked about, I think, Will, you're absolutely right. They were looking for a little bit more physicality. I thought we saw a little bit more of that last year. I like his mobility. His work rate around the pitch is good. I mean, he's been learning beside Cam Dolan for the past how many years now? That's a great person to learn from. If he can, and I think you're spot on, Will. If he can just add a little bit more muscle, and a little bit more physicality, then he's a good prospect. Good age too. He's 26, so he's he's coming up through the ranks. He's played enough at the professional level now. I think this is going to be a big year for him at NOLA, and he's got competition for spots.
I think just to add to there, like that, you're right, competition for spots at NOLA, but I actually, even though that we the USA have lost someone like a Greg Peterson, I do wonder where there's some other elements of competition that do come in. Look, what I'm trying to say, I want to get onto is Sam Goller. I question whether USA either have got to make a decision, and they can do it now. The fact he's at Anthem is either make him a really out-and-out second row, or you keep him number 6, and you don't say, oh, we're going to treat him like Courtney Laws. Play with Courtney, amazing. He only later into his career then became a 6 because he was such a freak of an athlete. I don't think we're going to waste a lot of time with Sam if we're just trying to play in between the two. This is the beauty of Anthem, and sorry I might be getting ahead of myself, is that there's control there amongst the US coaches in terms of what is best for that player. So as much as we talk about Wagersbach, as much as we talk about Gandy, and we could talk about a few others as well, but I think Goller could be the real, I know he's already playing that second row position, but like really sort of build I want you to almost build your front five around him, rather than sort of dishing between the back row or second row as well. It's who goes with him, though.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, the question we're asking.
Yeah, that would be my comment on Gala, is that I also like him at 6. And I agree with you. I'd like to see just a decision made either way. I think if you do pick a Gala, you can't partner him with Grandy. They're just too short. You've got to have, maybe a Rick Rose coming up who's got the height,
yeah,
6'7", or Micaiah Wynyard, looking how he goes with LA, another guy who's 6'7". So, Chunya Munga, if we're talking about throwing out names overseas, would be a dream to have. But, I think if you're going to have Gala at lock, then you've got to have a towering guy, a real line-out guy beside him.
Go ahead, Fitzy.
Yeah, I was just gonna throw out one more name. He's probably a little further down the line, but he is on Anthem, former rugby guy. I think he's like 6'8". Lucas Scramlick. Do I have that right?
He's gone now. Yeah, so I'm hearing that he's joining the military actually, and is stepping away from rugby. So that's unfortunate. He's certainly has the height that you wanted, the size that you wanted. So, but yeah, I'm told that he's stepping away from MLR.
All right, scratch that name off the list.
Yeah, he was. I stood next to him in Charlotte the first game last season. That dude is big.
Yeah, if anybody would have compared to Greg Peterson in terms of frame and size, it was going to be Gramlich.
Brian, what's the status with Micaiah Wynyard? He's over the La Rochelle Academy side for a couple of years. He's 21 years old. What's the deal with him?
Well, he's a big guy. I think the thing with him is similar to Wagsback. They were looking for him to be a little bit harder, more physical, and really use that bulk to good size. So now he's going to be working with Steve Hoyles in LA. So that's a good guy to work with, and hopefully he'll develop there. I mean, he's got the right frame. He's got the right age. He's the kind of guy you want to be building towards 2031. So I'm keen to see how he's developed. I haven't seen hardly any footage on him from his time in France. So I'm interested to see how it goes.
All right, let's jump to the back row where clearly every kid plays. We have no shortage of depth at the back row. Lots of action there. I mean, Will just mentioned Sam Golick and go either way. We have a healthy Nana Schultz. He's back in. Patty Ryan is playing great. Corey Daniel, etc. But looking at these younger guys, I've noticed. I'm just going to list off one or two names. Brian, I mentioned. Will, I mentioned to you before. Like Nafi Maafu, I've been keeping an eye on for years. If he can stay healthy, right now he's nicked up again. But when he was healthy this year with Biarritz playing number 8, he played great. He was on the Pro D3 team of the week. He scored a try or two, and now he's making his move over to top 14 next season. So, Brian, let's stick with you. Let's talk about the back row.
Yeah, I love Maafu as an option. I mean, I'm interested actually to see how his brother goes with Anthem this year. He's getting a bit of hype going in, but Nafi's bigger. I mean, he's 6'5", maybe 6'6". And he's an athlete. I mean, I can recall seeing him at like under 18 level moving around the pitch like a back, and it was really a sight to see. He's bulked up a lot since then. I think this switch to number 8 has been good for him. And I think he's a really interesting option. He gives you a line-out option as well at the back of the scrum. So he's a really love to see him in an Eagles jersey, even if it's at lock, wherever. I really like him in the back row, though. I like his mobility. I like Makeen Ali Khan, who's come over from Harlequins and played with Dallas last year. He's a really hard-nosed guy. He's not a huge guy, but as a 7, he's physical. I like the way how he runs kind of past. His target is past the people who is in front of him. He's not running into contact. He's running away from contact into space, hitting those soft shoulders. So I really like the way he plays. He's physical in defense. A guy who, again, he just looks confident out there. So I think he would have been capped if he wasn't injured this past fall. So I'm really looking forward to see him in that Anthem back row this year. So those two guys for me are real interesting up and coming athletes who would fit really well.
Well,
totally agree with Alakan. I remember actually watching him in the flesh when Dallas played San Diego, and honestly was seriously impressed. It does help when you had Geronimo Gomez-Vara playing next to him as well. I mean, he is honestly, for him going to the Free Jacks, as an absolute steal. Separate note, but no, Alakan, it is exciting. The only thing I would say is I think we have quite a lot of similar style players to Alakan. I think what the US really misses, and they have it to a degree with Jammer, Fernanda Schultz, is a genuine ball-carrying back rower. you'd almost want to, and it goes back to our second row debate in terms of like having the ability to have a couple of really strong back row carrying options. I thought Paddy Ryan was fantastic on the November tour at number 8. He has been an absolute find. Some great conversation a couple of years ago about the fact he was American eligible through his grandfather. Here he is now. But look, it's an area that I'm a bit wary of for the US. It's not really answering a question of who's the up and coming one. I think Ma'afu is definitely maybe that option. I probably don't know enough. But asking me again, who's one to look out for? I really like Ronan Murphy. I really like him at Sabercats, and he was at Media Day last week, and had a chat, and it was more like, okay, Scott are you on his radar? Is he a conversation? And apparently Scott is very much talking to him, but he needs to work on his defense. And now I think about it, and I think, yeah, he's right. He needs to be a bit more stronger in that department. I think his loose play is fantastic. And, you know, St. Mary's style of play, he's obviously come from the Gales. I think there's always going to be his loose play is great. But again, comes back to the point of having someone hard-nosed, both sides of the ball. And I don't see anyone at the moment. I'm just, without being negative, I don't see anyone. I think, and I'm looking across my shoulder at some of the other names that have been mentioned in your list, Bill and Fitzy. But I just think we desperately need like a young Tavita, you know, David Tamalau, you know, just to bash through and have that line out option where you can just send someone up the middle and away you go, you play off that. We don't have that yet. Yes, Jammer, but I don't know about Jammer sometimes as well at number 8. So it's a hard one.
Well, that's interesting about Jammer, because when he's playing for Old Glory DC, he's lining up as a flanker. Yet when he plays for the Men's Eagles, he's always putting on that 8 jersey. And I always, every time I watch the Men's Eagles the last few tests, we're like, Simon Cross, Alistair Kirschpool, we do an Old Glory DC podcast. We're always like, Simon, why not put Jammer at 8? And he says he likes him there, you know, as a flanker, coming off and causing havoc there and setting up stuff for the other forwards. Okay, that's fine. One other player I want to talk about here quickly, just see how he factors in, a guy who's back in MLR now, Joe Johnston. I believe he's domestic eligible now. Brian,
he was before.
Might have more info.
He's got American. His mother's from Boston.
There we go. Nice. Is he from what you were hearing or maybe seeing, would they be silly not to consider a guy like Joe, bringing him into the larger pool?
Well, 100%. I mean, the guy, he had a starring year in the NPC. The question is, does he want to play for the Eagles? You know, I think there's been a question of, has he made himself really available? I know that Gary Gold was interested, you know, when he was back a couple of years ago, and I think he rejected overtures at that time. He wanted to keep his eligibility kind of for Super Rugby intact. I think we're a little bit further down the line now. So if Joe wants to play for the Eagles, he should be talking to Scott Lawrence now and making that very clear. I think he's absolutely someone to consider. Again, as Will has correctly pointed out, you've got this group, you know, maybe more depth than we've ever seen in the Eagles back row, but absolutely right in that they're all kind of very similar. They're all kind of 6'2" to 6'4", you know, 225, 230 pound, good athletes. A lot of them can play across the back row. You're almost like a lot of utility, you know, generic loose forwards, almost like we really need to find some big thumping athletes, some guys who really bossed the Samu Manoa back in the day. I mean, where's the next guy like that we need, right? So, you know, maybe Nafi Ma'afu, he's got the size, that international size where he can come in at 8. He's a different style to Jama, where Jama just plows through guys. Nafi's a little bit more athletic, but he's got that size and athletic ability to do that. So I think he's certainly one that's interesting. Another guy maybe that's in MLR who I'm interested to see who develops is Emmanuel Albert, a big Ronan Murphy fan as well, by the way, to Houston. But I like Emmanuel Albert. He's got the size. I think with him, it's kind of a Gala situation where what's his position? Is he a lock? Is he a blind side? Can he play number 8 maybe? I know he's played a lot of number 8 with the St. Louis Bombers. So I think he's a good athlete. I think he's at the point now where he needs to start saying, okay, I'm a big dude. I'm a good ball carrier. I need to start kind of owning guys in games. I need to start dominating games. If we can see that out of him, then maybe he's a guy to look out for. But I do completely agree with you, Will. We need some real alphas in that pack, in that back row, to really get over the gain line and just, put that the fear of God, as Paul O'Connell might have said many years ago, in players on the other side of the pitch.
All right, before we move on, I think we should keep an eye out for Albie O'Shannessy as well, from an Anthem, 25-year-old kid, New Zealander as well. And also, Brian, where's Brayman Murray?
I don't know. I'm assuming, he was very young last year. He was
right.
19, 20 years old. So I think he's gone back to England. I'm not confirmed on that, but I suspect that's where he is. Otherwise, I can't imagine why Anthem wouldn't want to bring him back.
All right, let's move on to the pretty players. Let's go to the backs. There are some positions like the forwards where we have lots of depth, and others clearly we do not. So let's start off with one of those positions, number 9, scrum half. Will, going to begin with you. I'm just going to throw out a couple names. There's some young kids out there that I keep an eye on overseas. Judd Berman is really young. He's just playing J1 in AIL in Ireland. Solomon Williams played really well last year with the U20s. The same thing with Spencer Huntley. But who have you seen at the scrum half position?
Well, I definitely want to talk about Spencer Huntley for a bit, because knowing his dad's, Southern California, San Diego, huge development. Just like, gosh, that kid is still so young. I think he's actually only 18, maybe around going on 19.
He's in high school.
Yeah. But I think his plan is, from the last time I spoke to his dad, his plan was to potentially spend a period across in England, actually with Hartbury College, to go to their sort of system over there. I hope to God we don't lose him suddenly down a pathway where he then becomes English, qualified, moves his way into Hartbury, being connected with Gloucester, and then that's an academy, which then he wouldn't want to play for the US. You can see where I'm going with this. But honestly, such a talented guy. Right, I remember when I was back at San Diego Legion and we had him on his school holidays, he'd actually come and do a bit of training with us. And physically pretty developed, young. He's developed early, and obviously has had some really good training and sees the game really well. I think that's one of the key things which, if you've noticed, a lot of the scrum halves, you take away someone like a Mike Petrie, kind of have come out of the foreign mold. I think in my scrum half when I was playing with the Eagles, Sean Davies had a South African background, even as young as now. Ruben de Haas, he also has a South African background as well. It's a really challenging position for a American domestic talent, and that's no disrespect. We'll come on to fly half in a minute, but it is just an IQ of that position, and you really have had to have reps, and you have to be engrossed in that position for years. And I question whether we've really got that in the domestic standings or whoever's coming up. But Spencer is one who I've seen. I've heard a lot more as well. I think he gets it, this kid. I think he absolutely loves the game. And I'm incredibly excited. But he's still so young. His acceleration, I'm sure planning stages will be in place, I hope, that we can keep him within our US system, but also, not do anything too sharp too quickly. Do you just chuck him into a tour to get him capped? Maybe, because you just keep him that way, but I don't know if that's the right decision. And I think, just quickly at the moment, who else have you got in that position? You got someone like a JP Smith. He's coming to the back end of his career. I think Ethan McVeigh is exciting, although I've got to say Connor Buckley, I thought, matched him, if not at times in the MLR season. I think Brian's nodding his head, was better than Ethan in a DC jersey. So, and then Ruben de Haas, I think, had one of his best tours in the US, by the way.
He did. And he's still young. He's still only 26.
Still young. Coming over to New Orleans as well. Good to get more in the American system. And, as much as he might continue to play overseas, it'd be great to see him fully invested in MLR. But yeah, Spencer's one to look out for, Spencer Huntley. But I just think it's a very difficult position to really see positivity in the future in. I'm sorry to be negative.
Brian, what's your take?
I'm a little more positive with scrum half. I like that you mentioned Buckley. He is Petrie's protege, right? I mean, he had a lot of hype behind him. I think he would have really benefited from some time overseas, maybe down in the Shoot Shield or anywhere. Just send him somewhere. I mean, now we've got him in MLR, and I thought he really came on towards the end of the season. I think that kind of battle for spots between him and McVie at Old Glory has been really fun to watch. So that'll be interesting again. They're both 25 years old, so they're certainly still young. Another young guy, very similar spot to Huntley, who had a lot of kind of hype when he was 18. Damian Morley, when he was coming up, and then he actually went over to France, spent some time there, and he's now back at Miami studying under Tomas Kubeli. So didn't get a lot of time last year, but still very young, 22. So I'm interested to see how his development comes along. As far as someone who can come in right now, I think would have been capped probably in the fall if he was available, was Oscar Lennon at New England. I really like his skills. He can kick off both feet, which is a really nice thing to have for a scrum half. He's got a slick, his basic skills are really slick. He sees the game well. He likes to play fast, which seems like what Scott Lawrence wants to do. So if Lennon makes himself available this year, then I think we'll see him in the Eagles squad. I'm excited about him. I'm a little bit disappointed not to see Connor McManus on the anthem sheet. I don't know what's happened to him. I thought he looked really good coming back. Went to New York to anthem last year. He kind of contemplated retirement. So, maybe he's doing that again, but he got, convinced to come back, and I thought he looked good with anthem. He just had some injury problems. So I don't know what's up with him, but I thought he was one to watch.
All right, we're going to jump forward. We're getting a little late, so we're going to skip fly half. Just kidding. And Fitzy, I'm actually going to start off with you since I skipped in this last one. Obviously, AJ McGinty is still our first go-to number 10, and he turns 35 in a month. So, like we talked about earlier, unless he pulls a Johnny Sexton, this is his last World Cup coming up, most likely. So let's talk about fly half. I'm just going to throw out one or two names. I love Rand Santos. Oliver Klein's a good guy to look forward to. Fitzy, what do you got?
Yeah, I think that if you just start an MLR, another player who's probably maybe a year or two away, Brian, you could probably confirm this, but Houston's fly half, Davey Koitzer, phenomenal the last 2 years. It sounds like, Bill, we asked him on this program when we had him on, that question pretty pointedly, and I think he artfully dodged it, but I think, he kind of hinted that, he'd like to do it. Brian, is he like a year?
27.
27. Okay.
27. Wow. Okay.
So he'll be eligible World Cup year, but we got to wait till then.
Yeah. Okay. We can't just lie on his birth certificate. I guess not.
Let's go, Will. What do you got? You play that position.
Yeah. It's I don't want to be the bearer of bad news.
We've got nobody.
No,
the
really
guy.
No, really like Rand Santos. Had a good conversation with Jack Clark about him. He was actually over playing sevens down in Chula Vista at the West Coast Sevens competition back in, I think, October it was of last year. Sees the game really well, capped him, got to work on his defense. I think now the fly-off position these days, particularly at international level, you've got to have a defensive game. You look at AJ and why he's a really strong player, and he has had the career he's had. He really defends hard, and he almost runs a defensive system by himself as well. And I mean that just in terms of like his communication with it. You'd be surprised how a fly half can have a great game if he doesn't make a tackle, but he'd be very good at having a great game at communicating how the defense works, as much as you also work with your inside and outside center. But yeah, so Rand Santos is definitely one to be excited about, but it is just the position which and I love Luke Carty. I feel like Luke has just had a couple of years like where he just needs a 10 jersey, and I hope he gets that at NOLA this year. I really do. Yeah. And we can properly see what he's about, because I actually think he had a good year in the Eagles jersey in 2024. But it's a position we're struggling with, guys. I mean, we can be nice about it, and it comes back to my whole thing about the real IQ of the position. And this is where I would say I am absolutely 100% for domestic talent. I really am, promise you. But there are certain positions where I think you do have to look, what is overseas? What is the potential bring in that New Zealand-born type player, or a David Kutzer, like you mentioned, like, yes, like really 2027, AJ maybe retires after that. I don't know. I don't want to retire him, but you do invest in someone like Davey. But it's
Well, what about a guy like if we're looking? What about a guy like Jack Walsh?
What an interesting name to pick.
Could we get him to commit?
Yeah, I mean, so he forgive me, he's still at the Ospreys, or has he gone to the Scarlets? Still at the Ospreys. Yes, good player. I think he needs to understand about what his rugby future looks like. Questionable that it still is in Wales and whether he's going to get the opportunities available. And I can see that and sense that because I was in that experience myself as a player. And I think making wise decisions about what you want out of your career at his kind of age now, sort of in the mid-20s mark, I think he might be 25 at the moment. I know there's some discussion in trying to potentially get him involved. And the last time I was speaking it was still a no, but that was not this season, I should say. I think he'd be definitely one to consider. And it goes back to my point. I think, good quality fly half from abroad who knows and sees the game well and is young enough to build around. It's just whether he wants to and whether he feels right. So that I can't answer.
Brian, quickly, what do you got?
Yeah, I think for Walsh, it's same thing as Munga and same thing as Salanoa. If these guys want to play in a World Cup, it's probably going to be with the Eagles. So the closer we get to that World Cup, and presuming they qualify this year, which I'm very much planning on them doing, then maybe these guys will start to make that decision. I think Walsh is the only guy out there who could possibly break into the number 10 jersey this coming year for the Eagles if he made himself available. Kutzer is the right age. He's 25, so in 2027, certainly interested in him. Here's a random name for you that I'll throw out. Mac Mason. He'll be eligible next year, even if he doesn't step on the field at all this year.
Where did he go?
He's back in the farm in Australia.
Back to the farm, guys.
So,
I love that thinking, Brian, but I think that might be, unfortunately, maybe long gone. But yeah.
No, I agree. I was just throwing it out there for kind of laughing. I personally think Rand Santos is better at fullback. I like how he sees the field, and I like how he runs the ball. He's got good height. So personally, I think his future is more to 15. The guy I'm really interested to know if he's interested for the Eagles, and this is kind of directed at you, Will. Harris Rutherford, what's up with him?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately domestic qualified, really good shout, Brian. I love it that you come in with the ones that we should be talking about this guy. Really the way of the restructure of Legion, I think he, in terms of the position there, no Matt Gitto's coming back or anything like that. I think Lincoln McClutchy, obviously the New Zealand player, I think the team will be built around him at 10. But I'm hearing Rutherford is strong, and I'm sure he actually got quite a bit of game time back end of last season for Legion. He is qualified. He does want to go after playing for the Eagles. So yeah, again, Scottish kind of European background. So we shall see whether Scott Lawrence maybe has a think for him in this year.
Will, what about Ben Pollock?
Yes,
versatile player.
Well, you're moving yourself straight to the backfield in terms of the number 15. So Ben Pollock, for those who don't know, Australian, but ultimately dual domestic qualified with the US, is a very good pickup. Chicago have done really well here, guys. I'll say it here now. Watch out for this young man at the back. Hot stepper, obviously. Great background, reads the game well. Just the things that I've seen, I'm already labeling as the one to watch. And yeah, domestic qualified. That 15, we're almost jumping ahead, but 15 is a position that the US.
No, keep going with 15. We'll work our way back.
Well, it's absolutely a position that they need, and that's nothing against. Again, I've talked to Mitch Wilson's face. It's a position which I think he might play a bit of at Anthem. I think because the US needs to decide where he plays and gets his game time. But we do not have a genuine out-and-out 15. Here's one just to throw in the mix. Maybe Brian can actually help me out with this. But Duncan Matthews can't be far away from being eligible. And I'm not saying he's at the right potential age, but having a genuine 15... Guys, I wasn't a genuine 15. We were fortunate that AJ and me played pretty well together as a 10 and 15 for the Eagles. But we need a genuine 15. I'd be very interested to hear Brian's thoughts, and even you guys, all of your thoughts on that position.
With Matthews, I just have to because he played the South Africa U20s, and for part of that time they were a capture side, so I'd have to go back and clarify whether he might have already been captured. And with Matthews, he's 30 now. He's had some injury issues, so that would be my concern. Personally, I would invest in someone young. I love Santos at 15, and where did my brain go? I love Pollock. What I've seen from him too, I totally agree. He looks class. So if you get these two young guys, they're American eligible. Santos has already been in the squad. I think Pollock, provided he lives up to what he looks like he's capable of doing, I think he'll be in the Eagle squad sooner rather than later. Toby Fricker's a guy who can come in and do a job. Corbin Smith, I see more as a winger. Personally, I like Santos and Pollock. I think both of them have the size and the ability, the footballing talent to really be at the back there for the back line till 31.
The only other option I'll just quickly say as well is actually whether you bring Eric Storty to the back. Played a bit of rugby there for the Eagles in November. I actually thought he looked strong. He looked good in the air. That's such a key skill when it comes to international level. So again, do you give him some reps with Anthem in that position if Scott feels like he needs 15? So yeah, big position to fill. I'm not going to lie. It's a key one, which we will see. I think we've got options, but we just need to see who the best one is.
Fitzy, let's go backwards here. I feel like you definitely played one of the back three positions as well. So let's talk more about the wings. So about wings. I mean, honestly, I think we have some of the best wings in the world, if you ask me. I mean, Connor Mooneyham finally getting his chance. Christian Dyer, Nate Oxberger is playing like he's 26. You get those guys in there. So, Fitzy, let's talk about some other wings out there. I mean, Keelan Farrell obviously lit it up last summer. Noah Brown is one of my favorite players now with Chicago. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my question, I guess, for Noah Brown is it 7s or is it 15s? I mean, has he truly made the decision on which when he wants to play? Because he seems to play well on both sides, and he really came on great for Chicago last year when he played a little bit. Another guy, I think he primarily is more of a center, and he's got a new start now in LA. But like Christian Dyer, is he a center? Is he a wing? Do you throw him on the field just because he's got maybe that international size that you want? But I'm excited to see if Christian Dyer can stay healthy and crack on and play well with RFCLA. There's a lot of talent on that team as they're currently in Fiji getting ready. I think in about 24 hours to play down there. If I've got my date line
on the beach.
Sorry, Fizzy, to jump in, but what's going to be so interesting about Dyer is the fact that he's playing for LA and not Houston now. I think the style of play that Steve Hoyles looks to bring in just the sides that he's had before. I joked with him. I saw him last week in Dallas. I said, "Are you going to finally get your hands on the ball this year? Or are you just going to chase kicks?" And he just smiled. He said, that's a good reason of why I've gone to RFC LA or Rugby LA, as it should be called. So I am really interested. I think it's a big year for him. And quickly, while I'm just yapping along, Noah Brown needs a big year. And I agree with you in terms of they choose 15s or 7s. For me, there's only one thing he should be doing. That's choosing 15s, building up to a World Cup, and he can jump on the LA train 2028 after that. But he needs to really go and get that position for Chicago this season for me. He's got it. I know there's some workings that he needs in terms of positional stuff, and they get found out. He will get found out if he doesn't work on his positioning, just with the kickers in international rugby. Martin Asefo, love him to bits, but again, because of his lack of knowledge of the position, he sometimes struggled on the wing just from being not in the right position. I remember George Ford just put it over his head during the World Cup, and it was a real sort of lesson. Marty was brilliant in so many other aspects, I must say that. But Noah, if he learns those things, he's got the talent, he's got the pace, remain fit, and I think he could be a real Eagle star moving forward.
Hey, Brian, what's your information on Waisei Banabur? I think I'm saying his name completely wrong.
Bainambure.
Yeah. I was so close.
Really interesting talent. I mean, he's the kind of athlete you want to see. He's playing center over in a French academy. He was like he's 19, 20 years old.
A lot of wing this year also.
I think the question that I have is he actually Eagles eligible? I don't know when he moved to the United States, and now that he's gone over, and now that it's this registration thing. It's not just a consecutive residency anymore. It's just registration. Now that he's playing in France, does that affect whether he's eligible, even if he was as 5 years previously? So I don't know the answer to that.
I thought he was born. I thought he's from Santa Rosa, California. I could be
as
wrong.
far as I know, he's Fijian, and he moved something like when he was 13 or something like that. So I do not know actually if he's eligible or not. If he is, get him in, some kind of program, whether it's the long list, whatever. Take a look at him at least, because he's the kind of athlete you certainly want to have a look at.
All right, Brian, let's wrap it up with centers. Jump on in.
Yeah, center's an interesting. I think obviously the guy who stands out for me is Junior Gaffa. I don't think I'm saying his last name properly. I don't think he corrects anyone. I think it's actually like Nafa, because the G is an NG in Semel. Anyways, he had such a cracking season for Anthem. He's obviously a brilliant athlete. I think there's little footballing things you can work on with him coming from, collegiate football, but pure athletically, he's not a huge guy. I mean, he's 5'10", 95 kg, 210 pounds in there, 215 maybe. But he runs so hard. He's got great leg drive. He's got explosive speed. He tackles well. I think he's such a dynamic player, and you need some dynamic athletes in that back line to really spark some attack. We started to see Tavite Lopetti kind of getting back to his best this past year after some real knee injury problems. So not quite as explosive, I think, as he was when he first came up. But Gaffa, man, he just has that step. He can move. He's got, good upper body strength. He can fend guys. I like Gaffa a lot. I think you got to get him in there and have a look at him. I don't know how much Scott's going to, want to tinker this year. It looks like he's kind of settling on Dom Bissag, and who I like, and Lopetti in the midfield. O'Keefe's come along a little bit later in his career. Now, Storty, where do you play? I kind of see him as a number 23 in the bench guy who can fill in multiple positions. I don't really know what his best position is yet. But I think you need a crack athlete in that midfield anyways. If Dom Aquino was 20, he would be a heck of an exciting athlete. But unfortunately, he's just come along a little bit late in his career.
And Will, I got to ask you about Will Leonard. Recently became eligible, I believe.
Yeah,
29.
Well, I believe so. And again, I will always refer to Brian, whether he can correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe, Will Leonard is on the potential domestic qualified list. And that'll be interesting. But you're right, he's at the wrong maybe end of the spectrum age wise. Look, I think it's easy for us to talk about Dom Bissag, but I also do think we should talk about Dom because his maturity levels that I saw in the November tour were such high quality. Particularly his defensive work, his defensive reads, and playing alongside AJ, I just know he's really enjoyed and tried to absorb as much as AJ's knowledge and experience as possible. And I think you've really got to focus on playing the game of kind of not around him, but really being a focal point. This guy isn't the biggest, but he packs a punch. That try he scored against Tonga when he just bumped off two Tongans. Guys, trust me, that doesn't happen all the time. Or certainly never happened for me. And I think he's a real talent who obviously we're excited by, and I think Scott's doing the right thing, just drip feeding him in. The only thing which is just frustrating me at the moment, and I don't know whether it's because St Mary's just don't really have a number 10, is I want to call Tim O'Brien up and Andrew Cook and say stop playing him at number 10 for Gales. It's just like, I get it because it's college rugby, and this is almost one of the problems for someone like Dom is, I love college rugby. I support it. I really do. Way more over it in the last sort of year or two. But for his development, it's so key in the next sort of year or so. And we can't be mucking around with his position, even if he is only playing CRAA rugby, whatever it might be, like just hone in. And I know he'll get those skills. They work them hard at Gales, St Mary's. But let's really put him in as our number 12 for the Eagles going forward, because he really is a talent.
And to wrap things up, Fitzy, go ahead and name your first 15 for the 2031 World Cup. Go.
For 2031, half of them probably aren't even on the roster right now.
Well, come on, there's at least one of them here.
There you go.
There you go. Will, Scott Lawrence, when he was on our show this past year, he talked about I forget which series it was, maybe November series, about how messy Major League Rugby makes it at the international level. I don't know if Masson Fitz, you remember him saying that? Basically saying like the breakdown's really messy in MLR. The referees don't call this and that. So when they get to the international level, it doesn't equate. It's not helping them at the international level. Would you agree with that from what you've seen from the booth at least?
Yeah, look, I don't necessarily disagree. I think the refereeing is getting better. I think there's a big work on that. David Wilkinson has got, the head of refereeing with the MLR, and really trying to project the domestic. This is the other thing about this whole game we're trying to grow here in the US. You've also got to grow the referees. They've got to get up to standard with how MLR is growing on the field as a product. And at times, I've got to be careful, but at times I don't think they are. And I would agree with ultimately with what Scott is saying. The breakdown in international rugby is ferocious. It's on the verge of being the other side of the line in terms of, we all know the story of how Richie McCaw was one of the best in the world because he got away with so much. But you have to be so dominant in that area, and speed of ball for the US is absolutely enormous. And that's why they were better in November. The speed of ball was better, and it allowed Ruben De Haas, it allowed AJ McGinty to then produce and control the games. It's scrappy in Major League Rugby, and it always takes, in my opinion, probably until round 5 until you really get an understanding as to who's got a good attack or not, because it is just a bit scrappy. So in short, I do have to agree with Scott, but it is a ever improving thing for the league, not just for the players, but also, of course, for the referees.
Brian, you don't have to be careful.
I've done a fair bit of refereeing in my day. I was lucky enough to be part of an international competition in 2015, and I got to see kind of the difference between how the Northern Hemisphere referees, some of them have gone on to be professional referees, the difference between a Southern Hemisphere referee and the Northern Hemisphere referee, how they really look at the breakdown. And I just think MLR might want to veer or angle a little bit more towards how the Southern Hemisphere does. Certainly in the tolerance as far as rolling away and slowing the ball down, there's very little tolerance in that in the Southern Hemisphere. There's a little bit more leeway for kind of the jackler and staying in the way in the Northern Hemisphere, although it's improving, I guess, a little bit. But for MLR, certainly, that getting away the guys who are really trying to intentionally slow it down. We got so many cagey veterans who really know the Blair Cowans of the world used to really muck things up in the breakdown. So, it's knowing really, and it's tough as a referee because for a lot of these guys, these North American guys coming up to MLR, they've never seen this kind of stuff before. They don't quite know, all the tricks. So, we're getting there. I certainly saw improvement this past year. That was good to see. So hopefully we see more of that. And the breakdown certainly, what's tolerated as far as slowing the ball down, I think will be very helpful for MLR this year if they can really focus on that.
Well, gentlemen, we're past our time. I think we would have had more time if we didn't spend 17 minutes on intro songs. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll send you a link to the songs, and it will be on a Spotify playlist soon. Bryan Ray, America's Rugby News, Will Hooley, Rugby Rundown, TV commentator, former Eagle 517. Thank you both, man, for coming on. It's been a blast. It's so fun to talk to you guys.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, see, I cut him off.
You always cut people off. Come on, Bill.
Sorry, Will.
Get out of here, Will.
That's just the way we do things now. It's just part of the show. If I didn't cut them off, it would.
See, Bill, what I'm waiting for is next episode, next guest we have on. You're not going to like their answer, and you're just going to immediately kick them off the feed.
It's just, hey, that's my way of having control. All right, It's my.
I feel bad because I feel like we didn't cover the backs enough. We probably could have gone for another hour.
Yeah, we could have.
It's always fun chopping it up with them because they just know so much.
Well, there were a lot of names I was hoping to talk about a little more, like Corbin Smith, Stephen.
We talk about Keelan Farrell too much. He's probably the fastest wing coming up. But,
I know. I just I think we said his name once, and moving on. But that's the point. There's so many players out there. It's like, how do you fit the puzzles together? Who's the next guy coming in and stepping up and becoming that? I mean, you look at Rand Santos or a few of the guys, Oliver Klein, let's say, in the fly-up position. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're pretty good right now, but in 5 years, are they going to improve enough to make it to that next level. Carl Keane from Anthem, young guy, played in Japan, all high school All-American, St. Mary's, or whatever else. He has the resume to get to that next level, but will he? Right.
Well, it brings up an interesting point, and Will brought it up too, right? And I think particularly like a position like, say, fly half, right? Or let's start with a scrum half guy against a guy like Spencer, right? Who has potential to go overseas and play, which is great. It's probably best for his development if he can go play at the highest level he can. So any like domestic 9 or 10 that's here and is getting attention, say, hypothetically, can go play overseas, and you go do that. You go play where you can play at the highest level, maybe get paid a little bit more. But then do you potentially risk them being captured, so to speak, in the system long enough? That's a real risk. But I think you got to take that chance if it means these players can develop, and you can just stay on them and continue to develop the relationship, nurture it. They're part of the family. Keep them in the fold. Keep them in the mix. The trend line's going up for USA Rugby, that you hope you keep them in the system. But
that's the thing with Nafi Mafu. He's actually France eligible now. Yeah. So he keeps on playing too well.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now he's going top 14. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of Pro D2 players in the France international side. So let's just get him. I think Scott should be grabbing these people going, here's 8 minutes coming to the end of the game. Now you're ours. They did that with Luke Carty's brother. Ireland did back in 2019. They brought him in for like 2 minutes. Now he's played a number of the times since then. But
I mean, that is interesting, right? That the men's Eagles are potentially in a position where they're capturing because other nations are interested in those players. So that's a good.
All right, man. Hey, good stuff, listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Please like, follow, and subscribe this podcast, and please comment either on the YouTube, Facebook page, or the podcast. Podcast replays come out on Thursdays. Somewhat polished, very little polish to it on the podcast. But thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Tune in next week for our next show. We have lots of interesting guests lined up for this whole month or so leading up to the beginning of Major League Rugby kickoff season. Thanks again. Have a great night. Later.